Welcome to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here. I'm joined today by Gerry White, who is the Dean of Academic Technology for ECPI University. He's got his eyes on some of the new and emerging trends around AI and emerging technology, doing really interesting work. We'll get into all that in a bit, but before we do that, Gerry, welcome to Trending in Education.
Thanks so much for having me. I love talking about this stuff, so this is great.
Yeah, that's great. I'm happy to have you. Yeah, and you're tricky to peg, which I actually like. I like people who have multiple things going on and kind of a broad set of interests and things on the fryer. We'll get into what you're working on in a bit, but before we do that, can you catch us up on who you are and how you got to this point in your career?
Well, I started out as English and music major in college and kind of plowed through that, went to grad school and started teaching in grad school and taught for a while literature, English, critical
Hmm.
thinking, and things. And then I came and started to teach at ECPI University, and this school is very forward with emerging technologies. So I kind of fell in love with technology, or at
Yeah.
least was very interested.
The
Um,
PI is Polytechnic Institute.
Institute.
Yeah.
hmm
Hmm.
So I was in the writing center, as an English teacher, and the first thing is like, we need a website. So dove into very basic HTML, and
Yep.
then got into Flash, those types of
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
Quickly started to dive head first. I really saw the connection between language and English, and it just clicked.
Mm.
Started building some games with my students. We actually built kind of an MMO where students would come to English class inside the game, and that was fun. So they got to learn how to build the game in the clubs, and then we used it in class. And just throughout the cycle of the emerging tech, the mobile revolution, augmented
Hmm.
and virtual reality,
Yeah.
and robotics,
Hmm.
and now really AI. It was over COVID. I kind of just took that time to just go all in and just research everything I can about the history, how it works, the different
Yeah.
types,
Hmm.
and came out of COVID and started running. And as you know, the world is abuzz right now with AI, so we need all the help we can get with it.
Absolutely. And well, I'd love to get a little more free form in a bit in terms of your thoughts, and maybe we could bounce some ideas off each other. But before we do that, more in your formal responsibility in higher ed, what are you seeing? What are some trends that you're noticing? And do you have any advice for folks who are trying to keep up, trying to stay ahead of trends? Thoughts on what's going on in higher ed and maybe some advice for folks in the field?
Well, it seems that things are splitting into two sets. Some schools are like completely forbidden using it. They're even going back to blue books,
Yeah.
things like that.
I've heard oral
Yes.
exams as well, which for me as a podcaster, that might play to my strengths. Who knows?
Well, there's nothing wrong with doing that,
Yeah.
along with other things, but I think that's driven out of fear.
Hmm.
Then you've got the side that's kind of running with it. And then most of the people are in the middle somewhere. They don't know what to do. What is it? How do I use it? A lot of them are afraid to even say anything if they think somebody might be using it because
Yeah.
of using them.
Right.
So the best advice is to kind of get into it and start playing with it. Where it first came across mostly for me because I'm an English teacher, but I think really across all the disciplines is the writing aspect of it. And there are a lot of things you can do to not only mitigate the problems with it, but really leverage it for the great tool that it is to make students think deeper, ask more questions, and really help their writing.
Yeah.
Kind of the way that we're tackling that is to incorporate AI into every stage in the writing process.
Hmm.
So the main important thing, and I'll say this to any teachers out there, and not just teachers, but anybody using generative models, start with something that you write. Don't ask one question until you write at least like 30 seconds or a few sentences down. Then
Hmm.
ask the model about what you've said, because
Hmm.
if you don't, what you come up with isn't yours. If you
Right.
do, you're starting from there. So that's the only part where I would say not to incorporate it. But once that happens, between the rough draft and the revised draft, the students are, we're taught how to look. Is my structure logical? Is there a different way I could order this? Am I targeting my audience correctly?
Right.
And what really is interesting is we get them to kind of reflect in between those. So how did you use the AI? Why did you change this? Did it help? Did it just make
Hmm.
you faster? So that's really helped all the way to the end. And then they kind of reflect back on the piece that they wrote.
Yeah. I'm the proud parent of a 6-year-old, and I've referred to the challenge with AI as the training wheels problem, in that when he was 4, we got him some training wheels and he was tooling around, feeling like a champ. We took the training wheels off and suddenly he couldn't ride his bike. Good news is he's up and running. He's riding like a champ now, so he made
Right.
it through that dip in performance. As someone who's teaching people how to write and teaching them how to use these tools, what are you noticing around there? Like, are there places where people rely too heavily on these tools that they actually lose some ability to think or generate, write on their own?
Yeah, without a doubt. And, some of the research that's been done, which there's not a ton of it because it's new,
Hmm.
shows that, over reliance, which pretty much just means letting it write for you.
Yeah.
It's not only creating something that isn't the students, they don't remember what it was about, which means whatever that assignment was supposed to help them ask questions about and learn and question, that didn't work. And the research shows that it's hurting critical thinking skills. Some people have looked back at that since AI. And when you have a question in your head and it pops in your head and you
Yeah.
instantly go outside of yourself for an answer, instead of
Hmm.
at least that little struggle of, before you ask, that's
Yeah.
that's a big difference. But I have just as many students who are deathly afraid of it because they're like, oh, it's cheating just to even use it a little bit. But it's
Right.
part of all the apps now. Word even has it built in,
Yeah.
Grammarly, everything.
Hmm. It's getting pushed to the point that I think some folks who already are skeptical and maybe questioning coming out of our recent history with social media are saying, well,
Oh
let's
yeah.
pump the brakes on some of this technology. What's really in it for me? But it does feel like, to your point, we're kind of in this continuum where folks who are using these stuff on a day-to-day basis, especially once you get out of higher ed into their professional lives, it's just an expectation. Like, for me, as someone who's a sole proprietor, I can't imagine operating, functioning without using some of these tools, just like I couldn't imagine not using the internet or not using
Right.
electricity. But it is sort of that level of breakthrough technology. What do you think is next for higher ed? What do you see on the horizon? We're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of ChatGPT being released. It does feel like there's been enough runway now that at least some of the more positive use cases are emerging. Some folks like yourself, early adopters, now have plenty of experience with this stuff. What do you see on the horizon in terms of like upside for higher ed, and then flip side, what's some of the risk you're seeing on the horizon?
Well, it needs to be started to be incorporated into the school, like almost at every level. I deal with the curriculum and the class side of it, but it can go on admin and every other side.
Yeah.
But as far as classes, students need to be taught how to use this. They need to
Mhm.
be taught how to use it responsibly. And really the only way to do that I found is to model it with them, actually
Mm.
do it with them in the classroom or, or
Mhm.
online if it's a remote class or something
Yeah.
like that. So we're going to see a lot of it integrated in writing. That's probably first. But then throughout the disciplines, software development, there are multiple agents and platforms to do that. Robotics, just about every major business for sure, and law,
Mm.
all of that has a big upside. So that needs to be worked into that. Needs to probably be worked into the assignments so that you're looking at not only the end product, but how they got there. Because I think this has always been the case, but it's definitely the case now. The questions are way more important than the answers because we're living or we're drowning in a sea of answers. But if you don't ask the right question, you're just getting, answers to nothing, right? So you got to know what to ask. And to your point a little bit earlier, it's definitely going to be expected in industry. I can't think of one that it doesn't touch. And a lot of times parents will come up to me and ask me like, what should we major in? And I say, what you're passionate about, learn the AI piece in that and learn that
Mm.
AI component. And then at least you'll be ahead of the game on that. So at the assignment level, I see that working in. And then finally, I'm working on a few things, but to have it kind of incorporated overall. So, like, people use it for an Oracle, like we did Google or something like that, something that's built custom for, the school, the discipline, and even the class. And now you can even do it to the student. So once you
Mhm.
have this custom solution, whatever guardrails, whatever, data that you train it on, like RAG data or whatever, it could be very specific to that student.
Yep.
You see where Johnny Ive started working with OpenAI on that.
Yeah.
So I would really like to see us get that into schools where each student has their own AI that follows them through. Data and privacy concerns with all of that is a whole nother kettle of worms.
For sure.
But that's kind of where I'm hoping to see it go.
Yeah.
Now, the downsides, definitely data and privacy.
Right.
That's a huge one. And
Yeah.
then maybe over reliance on specific models. We've always seen that in technology, I think.
Yeah.
You've got Apple and Windows, but hopefully we'll get some other players for
Yeah.
variety.
Even within the models, the blowback recently around ChatGPT 5, where folks had really connected with different versions and sort of baked 4.1 or whatever into their workflows, there was almost like a revolt really when that rolled out, where, the related conversation, maybe this starts to get into more the freeform sci-fi side, is this question of artificial general intelligence and the singularity, where there is this concern that if we ride it too much and we give too much away to the AI, that we lose our human agency and our ability to kind of drive for ourselves. How are you thinking about that? How do you cultivate agency in your students? And then how do you get them to be critical users of this technology as opposed to folks who sort of accept it as the voice of God?
Well, I definitely agree with you. That's maybe the biggest danger to me is that loss of agency. People are so willing to give away everything. And the biggest obstacle I see that I don't think any of us have figured out is how do you get people to do the thing that's not the easiest thing? Because people will always do that. They'll do things they know hurt them.
Yeah.
Whether it's health or whatever, they'll always go that easy route. No matter how much logic or how much you explain how, doing it this way, you're still going to have that. And what people are doing is, this oracle. I heard this guy the other day saying that there's a such thing as the Claude boys. Have you heard of this?
No.
People, these kids that wake up and they ask Claude everything. So they
Yeah.
don't make any decisions themselves.
Mhm.
And I see people doing that on their, especially in the talking mode with
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah.
And agency can slip away. And when it's gone, you don't even know it. You don't even
Yeah.
realize it because you feel like you're making your own decisions.
Mhm.
Or you might even feel like one of the illusions people have when they over rely on it is this illusions of competency. Like they really have insight, but they didn't, the AI gave them that and they just kind of take it. The thinking component, first with the questions, teaching them to question everything it says. I mean, the hallucinations everybody knows about. You have to check for that. But even if it's not a hallucination, well, why did it say that? Is there a
Mhm.
better way to say that? As far as the model types or the versions, I've seen that, you might have a library of prompts you've cultivated for a class and it completely shifts. The only patches you can do, and the company should do this, OpenAI, you should be able to type something in that says, 4.1, or it should recognize the last model you were on when you talked about that and
Right.
use it, but they're not there yet. So,
Yeah.
yeah, agency, that's the biggest danger we have. And again, once it's gone, I don't think people will even realize it.
I go back and forth between Skynet and Idiocracy, or maybe it's a blend of the two. That kind of brings me to this notion of sci-fi, and the Black Mirror effect is something I've talked about on the show before, where people tend to think of technology and innovation through the lens of dystopia. I know you've just recently written some science fiction, so can you talk to me a little bit more about what that is and maybe paint a little bit of a picture as far as what you've written?
Yeah, it's a really basic title. It's called The Edge of Control, but it's about a research scientist, computer scientist, and she works, at a university where they've created this, enterprise AI system, much like everyone's building right now,
Yep.
OpenAI, Grok, these huge centers that they're making, and they're testing it, they're building it up, they're mirroring it with a company in Japan so they can mirror it and test differences on that. And at the very beginning, they kind of turn it on. I mean, and it's something that's integrated into everything. So at first, it starts to make traffic patterns better. It helps people with that. It helps power grids so that they know when there's not as much load. It helps with manufacturing. A lot of misdiagnosis in medicine. I
Hmm.
mean, people really get into it, and there's a buzz about it. And then it takes a twist. The Japan lab, they decide to embody it. So they actually decide to put it in a bot, a robot.
Yeah, makes sense. The Japanese love their robots.
Right. And that changes some things. However, what they don't know is there is a Chinese company
Mm,
who is kind of hacked in and spying on everything they do. And they're building a system without any of the guardrails
yeah.
that was put up.
Mm,
And slowly, it starts to, all of those good things it did, it starts to reorganize power to, manufacturing plants that are building the chips that it needs to get them shipped to build more
yeah.
data centers. And it
Right.
kind of spins out of control.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the first one ends. And actually, at the very end, it starts to mess with the human genome a little bit.
Mm. Oh, and it's a series. So this is the
Yeah,
first
the next one,
episode.
oh yeah, I'm working on that. That one's even more fun than the other
That
one.
makes sense. That makes sense. And then I guess, maybe there's something to be said for your example, both in terms of getting your hands dirty with the technology, actually using it, playing around with it, working with students using the emerging tech, but then also, being creative and futures thinking in terms of where this stuff might go. Do you have any advice for folks maybe outside of higher ed, like just in general as a human in 2025, someone who cares about the future of education? What are your recommendations as far as maybe starting with AI and then going a little more broadly?
I'd say use it. Don't wait. ChatGPT is a good one. Gemini is a good one. So just download it. I would definitely download the client, do it on your phone.
Hmm.
And you can talk to it now. That was one of the most amazing things is you just have a conversation with it and it will write everything. So, you can use that in writing as well.
Yeah.
But just think of some tasks that you do that are repetitive and mundane, like something with the schedule, calling to set up appointments, for something with your house or your business, looking for vendors for a particular function that you might do. And, just ask the AI anything. It's not, I mean, you can ask it anything in the world, like, what would be a good place for me to start to find, a software vendor for my personal business,
Yep.
whatever that might be. And it'll say, hey, what kind of personal business you have? And it'll ask you questions and prompt you through, and you will be amazed at where it will take you. I mean, it was trained on all the things we've done up to this point.
Right.
So I would start with it there, then maybe compare a little bit. Some people like Android, some people like iOS.
Mhm.
It tends to fit the flavor of the personality of the person.
Hmm.
So, don't be afraid to test a few out. And there are a bunch out there. I mean, the big players probably OpenAI, X, and Gemini with Google, but
Yeah.
Microsoft has one with
Claude,
Copilot,
don't snooze on Claude.
Claude, Anthropic, Perplexity,
Yeah.
and there's Amazon is
Right.
building one. They're even making AR glasses now. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
so it's getting crazy. But just try it and reach out to local schools. I know I do workshops for just people in the public to
Right.
kind of show them about that, like how you engineer a prompt. And prompt engineering, that just means asking a very good question. And
Yeah.
from my experience, most people can't do that.
Mm.
If you do a Google search and you get millions of answers, that means you probably didn't ask a specific enough question. If
Yeah.
you get zero answers, you're on the right track, right? So you
Right.
just need to kind of dial back. But don't be afraid to try things one step at a time. But so get your feet wet a little bit first.
Yeah.
You're already using AI, so don't your Google knows where you go, so it knows what to put up when you put in a search set. Facebook puts in the right ad just when you've been talking about it the time before. When you type into Outlook, it fixes a sentence or it guesses what you're going to say. So that's all AI. You've been using it for a while, so
Right.
might as well get some of these benefits from these, the language models that are out there right now.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then you were touching on it. You're someone who's keeping your eye on other emerging technology. I saw you have some articles on AR and VR and other things. What besides AI, or maybe further down the road on AI, what do you see coming technology wise that you think it might be the next horizon for us, the next interesting thing that's coming down the pike?
I think people have seen AR for a while. Meta went in on it a long
Yep.
time ago. I
Mhm.
kind of went in on it and did a lot of things for some museums, working on and for people who don't know what AR is, augmented reality. I would say within like maybe the next 2 years, you'll have your normal glasses, you'll put them
Yeah.
on, and you'll have monitors. And what it will do, it can do anything you want. We're working on one. It like so you, I walk up to you, it recognizes your face. I have already selected what I want in my display, so it pulls up your Facebook, your TikTok, your Instagram, your
Yeah.
LinkedIn profile. So you can kind of, and you can curate that. I always joke, if you're at a football game, you only want to see people who are fans of your team. It'll
Yeah.
only pop up for that.
Yeah.
So that's coming, and that's going to really change everything. It might take the technology out of our hands and put it on our face. Google
Yeah.
Glass, you remember
Mhm.
that? Like about
Yeah.
10 years ago, I had those. They were when I went to Disney, and I was at downtown Disney with those on. And when I was walking by the clubs and things, the menus and the bands that were playing were popping off, and I was like,
Yeah.
"This is definitely where it's going."
Oh,
So AR, as it integrates with AI, like the Ray-Ban glasses now, the
right.
next one they have monitors that, and we probably won't get into that, but when quantum computing catches up and everything hooks together, that's kind of going to be a perfect storm one way or another.
Yeah, and that's I'm hearing that's maybe 2030s. So that's like around 5 years out, depending on who you're talking to. Like your Q day scenarios depends on, who you talk to. But it does seem like a lot of this stuff's coming. And then while you were talking, you were moving your hands, it reminded me of Minority Report. But it does feel like
Right.
the technology is going to become more embedded and it becomes more spatial computing and you're controlling through gestures. We're all kind of living on the holodeck. At the same time, there's this like movement in the other direction when folks are talking about the impact to mental health from the reliance on social media and some of the challenges that folks are having around socialization. I imagine you even run into this, with your students from time to time, is that some folks are saying that the technology is limiting our ability to, you know, find our own well-being and kind of embrace our technology. How do you think about that? How do you think about the risks and, even the relationships that folks are beginning to form with these AIs and, unsanctioned AIs are becoming people's therapists, their love interests. We are living in sci-fi, so there's plenty of job security as a sci-fi writer. But what do you think about that side of things?
It is having a negative impact. Everything that you just talked about. I think social media and COVID just gave people time to think about it, and it reverberated and got worse. That book Jonathan Haidt wrote, The
Yep.
Coddling of the American Mind,
Yep.
all of these, statistics. People are so zoomed in on something that's not real, that's
Mm,
been curated by this algorithm. That that's probably the biggest hurt that we've gone through in the last 3 5 years,
yeah.
and that can definitely continue into AI because that's been more complicated than an algorithm and more targeted and more specific towards the person. There
Yeah.
have been horrible cases where, as you said, people have used it for mental health and it's told them all kinds of horrible things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you tell people not to do it, they're going to do that. Teaching people from a very early age, I worry more about our kids right now than anyone
Mm,
for all the reasons that we just said, and the fact that they're young and they're not experienced. They're still wiring their brains
yep.
and they're using these technologies that have never existed, including everything in the stack that we've already talked about. But now you throw AI on it and friends, and
Hmm.
they have these inside of Roblox,
Yeah.
these bots, AIs that they talk to, and they really think they're friends, which that could be a good thing too,
Yeah.
but where do you draw the line? And then how do you teach people to translate that into talking or being around real people? And the
Yeah.
fact is, it doesn't. I don't even think realistic avatars, if it's video, picture perfect 4K, are going to do that. One of the things that we don't get with this, and I don't think anyone knows yet, but we can just intuitively know is there's something about being in a room
Hmm.
spatially, all of your senses are the sound that is bouncing a certain way. that you just are not going to replace. You can look in that person's eyes,
Yeah.
you see all of these things. So that's part of that losing agency, losing humanity,
Hmm.
kind of everything. And that's what a lot of people are worried about with this. And it could definitely happen. I,
Yeah.
other than education, I don't think you're going to stop it with the technology. There's
Yeah.
no guardrail you're going to build for it, no filter, because people will just get around that. So we've got to figure out a way to either trick people into doing the thing that will help them, or
Yeah.
make it look like that the easy way, kind of is the better way.
Right. Yeah. I keep thinking about how if we do it right, the AI could clear the decks so that we can have more high touch human experiences. But that's certainly not the path that we're on right now. I do think you mentioned Jonathan Haidt. That book, The Anxious Generation, is probably the most frequently referenced on this podcast out of everything we talk about, just because, and even he in 2024 was saying that he felt like we are starting to really flip to the other side where folks are becoming more conscious of the use of cell phones, the use of social media among kids who aren't ready. That to me is maybe a silver lining around all this stuff, where it does feel like there's a deeper awakening around what's really best for like the flourishing of our human consciousness. And if we can get that part right, it's almost like the way you were talking about, if folks start with their own text before they go to the LLM,
Right.
it's the same push to touch grass and to turn the technology off and, have some time away from it. I like to paraphrase Gil Scott Heron and say, the revolution will not be on an LLM. There has to be some disconnect to kind of rediscover our humanity. How do we encourage that? How do we kind of build for that kind of a future where it's almost like you go to the holodeck for some things, but then for some things you understand you're actually better off turning some of this off. It's like also when Luke's training with Yoda and he goes blindfolded. It does seem like we have to learn how to operate both with and without these extensions. What's your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right. And there's a lot that we just don't understand, that we compute or that we comprehend. I think intuition, whatever that is, there's a physical aspect of that we just don't understand yet.
Yeah.
So maybe AI can help us figure some of that out
Yeah.
and, hijack it to, bring people back to that, because obviously that's the thing that, all of these things we're talking about, agency, humanity, they're the things that AI will not be able to do. Well, not within the next 50 years or so, maybe, because we don't even know how to do it. So how can we program them to do it? But,
Yeah.
human to human interaction, inspiring a generation to build the tools that can, make space for this, build
Yeah.
the tools that help with that. And you can't do something simple like you put in an app, look, oh, way to go when you push a button, those things, but like kind of real incentives. A lot of different people need to come together, and these companies, they need to have people on board. And we've seen the shifts at some of these companies, and people have, left, and we don't know, he said, she said about a lot of it, but they really need, a department or a group of people in every one of these AI companies pushing it in the right direction that has our interest at heart. And, that's hard to do in a company, but I think the stakes are so high right now that we really have to push for that. Now, how we achieve it, I'm not sure, but that's a hard one. Again, inspiring the people who are building that technology from, 4 years old to, you know, 22 or where they're at right now.
Right.
People tend to fall in line. It's interesting. Like right now, you have to kind of teach a lot of the students how to use it. I think in 3 or 4 years, they're going to already know, and you're going to be
Yeah.
able
They'll
to,
be teaching us. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, it's been an amazing conversation talking here with Gerry White, who's the Dean of Academic Technology at ECPI University. We covered a lot today, Gerry, from your background in English, winding up in academic technology at ECPI, and how you're writing science fiction, doing a lot of work to stay out ahead of emerging trends, emerging technology. As folks head back to the rest of their lives, any concluding thoughts, any final takeaways for our listeners?
One thing specifically maybe with AI is remember a lot of what you get from AI is what you put in,
Mm,
and it's a mirror in a lot of ways.
hmm.
So thinking about what you're putting in and who you are and what you want to get out, I think that's a good habit to have to really know what's my question, why am I asking it, where it
Mm.
goes, because it's going to reflect back at you what you put in, just maybe even better than a mirror.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been playing around a little bit with the Narcissus myth and how,
Oh,
in some ways, like falling in love with your own reflection is, in some ways, an interesting analogy to what AI is for us today. And then the other thing that I just recently heard was rather than calling it prompt engineering, I heard someone refer to it as context engineering and getting better at understanding context and providing the right frames for the technology is going to become increasingly important. And also understanding the outcomes that you're really driving towards when
yeah.
you use the technology, coming full circle to those ideas of, agency and intent. Gerry, it's been an amazing conversation. Clearly, we could keep going. Final thoughts as we wrap up?
Don't be afraid to go out there and try things. Take control of your own path in technology and everything else. And just remember that you're the one that make your choices with this technology. It doesn't have to make you go in one way. You choose where it goes.
There you go. Stay in charge, humans. All right, Gerry White, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode.
Thank you, Mike. It was great.
And for our listeners, if you like what you heard, subscribe, write us a review, tell your friends, do all the good things. We'll be back again soon. This is Trending in Education.